So finally, we have someone, Reb Yaakov Kronenberg, who is leading the path to bring us back to our understanding, our deeper understanding of Jewish astrology. People who have been living in exile, and right now we're in the American exile, and doesn't look so great over here at this moment. But we have leisure time. Leisure time produces excellence and scholarship on a broader basis. And so finally we've come to a place where a man has had the ability to be able to put together Jewish astrology and start teaching us about the learning of our ancestors. A lot of these things he wants to say are very relevant today. They're always relevant because the world is always moving, and this is what discusses those movements. Let's come over here and pick up chapter 3, and we're going to kind of work on this as best we can. The book is unwieldy at this point. We'll do the best we can. And he says, look, if you look through today's literature, you cannot see much on Jewish astrology. And as we have mentioned in the past, this lack is in all areas of Jewish scholarship, science, and art. So it is not just in astrology. There is a period of about 1,500 years in our past history when, according to the thinkers in the Western world, there are almost no Jewish books of any significance from that period. Even though many Jews lived amongst them and wrote many great books, this period started around the time of the Talmud, up until the time of the Enlightenment and the emancipation of the ghettos, when some Jews gradually became secular, like that was in the late 1700s and early 1800s. Then you suddenly see the descendants of all those Jewish writers, from Karl Marx to Spinoza, Einstein, and Freud, and all other Jewish thinkers who suddenly came to the world. But where were all these Jewish writers and thinkers doing all that period before this enlightenment took place, starting from the end of the Talmud and then onwards? Okay? What happened to the Jewish writers during the Dark Ages? Who are they? Were Jews only farmers during that time? This is an interesting topic, and when you look into it, you realize that a tremendous amount of Jewish literature had been written in this period, yet a lot has been lost, especially to my generation who do not study them. The great place of Torah scholarship here in the United States, or there are several, but one of the main places is called Lakewood. Lakewood, nobody studies these materials at all. They study the Talmud. So what's going on? If you look at Muslim and Christian religious philosophy, none of them really ever denied that the Jews used to be the chosen people. They all say that they lost this status, and these new religions were chosen later as replacements after the Jews were abandoned. In contrast, the Holocaust is being denied today by some people who said it never happened and that the Jews made it all up. The leader of the Palestinian Authority wrote his doctorate claiming that the Holocaust was a myth. So they are already denying the Holocaust and it happened less than 100 years ago. But when it comes to the revelation of God to the Jews at Mount Sinai, nobody of any significance throughout history denied that the God revealed the Torah to the Jews. In ancient history, we have no claims that Jews made it up, or were on drugs or something like that. Like a sinister plot. They just came along some hundreds of years afterwards and began a new story that the Jews messed up, didn't behave properly, and therefore God chose others to replace them. But they never denied the truth about the Torah. But in Judaism, religious Jews always held that even though Jews sometimes messed up and were punished and were exiled, every Jew should still repent and wait for God to redeem us. For God will never completely desert his chosen people, with whom he made an eternal covenant. But not all was lost, and if you look, you will see that there's tremendously profound Jewish literature from all of those lost years, the years called the Dark Ages, or maybe we should call it the Jewish Dark Ages. And there are great books. So this is a man, Reb Yaakov Kronenberg, who is an explorer and a researcher. When I was introduced to these books, I was astonished to see how many books had been written over this period and totally ignored, and how much of Jewish religious thinking exists through these books, searching back or reaching back into the Middle Ages. And just like they were written off from history, so I think the same thing happened when you look deeply into astrology. And you realize that obviously astrology comes from the Torah, from the 5 books of Moses, and from Adam Rishon, whom I would like to talk about today. So, he's talking. Let me see if I got this lined up okay. There we go. Avram Avinu watched the movement of the stars, and through them he realized that there is one God, one movement in everything. So he got to know God through astrology. Seeing the stars, he said, look, they move and affect things down here. So why is this? And who came to the conclusion that such a vast universe has to be run by God? Now, God is just a 3-letter word. So we're using it in English. But he means to say that there has to be a master. And through these intermediaries, he communicates with humanity. So the subject and the question of why God chose to run the world through planets and firmaments is important. And this is let me read that again. So the subject and the question of why he chose to run the world through planets and firmaments. In other words, we are linked to I picture it as a gear system. We are all linked in terms of our energy to the gears of the firmaments and the planets. And this is a deep subject which the Kabbalists talk about. If you study non-Jewish astrology, you realize that regular astrologers don't even ask the question of why God runs the world through astrology. All that the deep thinkers and philosophers of non-Jewish astrology ask and discuss is the question of why astrology works, but not the question of why is there such a thing as astrology? Why does everything have to work through the gear system of the universe? Or, a little bit more, what is the purpose of the planets indicating what happens on Earth? Why should it be that we're related to the planets at different times of the year and different kinds of situations? Everything changes. We should keep in mind that astrology is an idea accepted in all parts of the world throughout history. The Greeks, the Romans, the medieval Arabs, and all other peoples and cultures all had astrology, and I don't think there is any exception. All grew up with and through astrology. Academics tell us that astrology started in Babylon. So you could ask, how did astrology start and spread throughout the world? How did people accept it, and how did people realize that the planets have influence over the Earth? If you look at the 12 constellations of the zodiac, we see that it was drawn in symbols. There are different diagrams for it, which can be learned. It's not a big deal. So one may conclude that the original founder of these 12 symbols may have seen the stars and drew lines connecting them, and from these lines came the symbols of the constellations, which are called zodiac. Otherwise, then, how did these people around the world come to accept these principles in astrology and these connections to the stars if they lived in different geographical areas with different views of the skies? And yet astrology all over the world agrees with the zodiac of 12 symbols. So in Australia, they look at the stars, or in Buenos Aires, or if you go up to the Norway or somewhere else. All of these things to understand the movements of the cycles, everybody agrees. And yet astrology all the world agrees with the zodiac of 12 symbols, so where does astrology actually come from? I have a hard time with this idea that it is of a Babylonian origin, or that a few smart people came along and drew the lines connecting the stars that made up other principles, and then the whole world just accepted all that without arguing and disagreeing with the fundamental questions. So I'd like to give a completely different explanation. That explanation will be in the next year, which people may not accept, but I would like to show a deep connection between the Bible, the Torah itself, and Jewish astrology. This is Baruch Fleischman for the Tikkun Elevator Kollel.